Okay, what's up, everybody? How you doing? Brian Keene here with you. Welcome to the official release party, launch party, whatever you want to call it, for Curse of the Bastards, the third book in the Rogan trilogy by myself and Stephen L. Shrewsbury. Speaking of Steve, let's bring him onto the stream now. What's up, Shrews?
Oh, just still alive.
Still alive?
How are you doing? Still alive for
Shrews,
now, but it's early yet.
We have someone else joining us. What's that?
Doing fine, I said.
Doing fine. All right. You hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Yeah. You're drinking already, aren't you? I can tell. I am too.
Guilty as charged.
Yep. All right. We have someone else that's going to be joining us on the stream. She is the co-editor-in-chief of Apex Magazine, and she is the managing editor at Apex Book Company. She's also a formidable author in her own right. I am, of course, talking about Lesley Connor. Hello, Lesley.
Hello.
Are you drinking too?
I am.
Oh, that a girl.
Now, is that because you have to work with Shrews and I, and that's sort of like wrangling cats, and you figure you might as well just start drinking?
Hey, it's fun when you can get on a live stream thing and you're like, it's cool if I'm already drinking.
All right, and we must be live because I see comments popping up already, so thank you for that, folks. So yeah, I don't have a copy of the book to hold up and show because Jason didn't send me one early. Did he send you one early, Lesley?
No, I made him send me the ebook again, like the final ebook again, so that I could reread it really fast for yesterday and today for tonight. Because it's been a while. So yeah, I have the ebook.
It has been a while, Shrews. We started writing that when I was finishing up End of the Road, my pre-pandemic memoir. And that was 2016, I believe.
Yeah, because I was at CAT at the time, and we were talking back and forth when I should have been making parts, texting. We were talking about you and Hunter S. Thompson, and that's how that whole germ started.
Yeah.
We had never really discussed writing a third one until all that come loose, and I thought, wouldn't that suck if so?
Well, yeah, because
I guess that's
we ended the second book. Yeah, we ended the second book kind of okay. This is it. Rogan's retired. He gets to fish and sail for the rest of his life, and we didn't really have an idea for a third book until that incident in Louisville. For those who don't know what we're talking about, I'm a big Hunter S. Thompson fan. And I visited his childhood home in Louisville, Kentucky. And it's a private residence. People live there. So I wanted to be respectful. I didn't go knock on their door or anything, but I took a picture of it. And the mail carrier walks by. And I said, you must get people taking pictures of this house all the time. She says, no, why? I said, this is Hunter S. Thompson's childhood home. And she said, who's that? And so I started walking around the neighborhood and just asking people, what do you know about Hunter S. Thompson? Nobody knew him. A couple people said, no, I think the only famous person from Louisville is Johnny Depp. That was it. And, if a writer of that magnitude could be forgotten, then what the hell did that mean for the rest of us? That's kind of where we got the story for this novel.
Because Rogan is sitting there pondering at the last residence of his hero, Gore Legal, who's legend of ballads, and I write about him and other stuff. And he thought, Jesus, obviously didn't say Jesus for the flood, but he goes, hey, I'm historical. He's like, how the hell could that be? How could nobody know who that is? And then I've thought my whole life about him. And I thought that would fucking suck for him to ponder the fact that, is anybody going to think of me that way? Am I just going to be forgotten forever? So part of the story in there is him coming to terms with the fact that, well, is that life, or can I live with that, or does it matter? So it's an interesting little thing that all the stuff with the land of Nod and the, folks and all that kind of has nothing to do with that. But it's a fantasy novel, sword and sorcery and horror, so it all kind of generated, and he arrives at his conclusion at the end.
Yeah,
somewhat.
Yeah, and, you know, I struggled with it too. I that night in the hotel room, you know, I could not sleep, and that's rare for me because I fall asleep like that. And Mary's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I'm thinking about Hunter Thompson's house today. You know, I'm busting my ass on J.F. Gonzalez's estate. Now, Shrews, you were dear friends with Jesus. Lesley, you were dear friends with Jesus. He was your mentor. You were his protege.
Wonderful guy.
You know, and it started bothering me. I'm like, is he going to be forgotten? Is Tom Pick really going to be forgotten? Am I going to be forgotten when it's my turn? You know, and yeah, that's where we open with in the novel. You know, Rogan's not thinking exactly those same things because Rogan's not as quite in touch with his feelings as we are. But
no, not so much.
Yeah, but all right. So Lesley, as our editor on the book, I know you had a bunch of questions. So I think what we'll do for you folks out there watching, we'll start off with Lesley, and then I promise you, we will get to every question in the chat. So Lesley, why don't you kick things off? She's going to need another drink first, though, I think.
Well, I'm going to start with the persnickety editor question because you talked about sword and sorcery, dark fantasy, horror. Like Marissa, one of the other editors at Apex, she was just talking about like how unsettling she found the book. And I just must be super jaded because I just thought it was tons of fun. I was telling Jason today as I was rereading it, I was like, for some reason, all the dialogue, I read it in my head as if everybody's yelling. Like it's a very loud book. But when you're talking about those genre topics, like it doesn't fit squarely in like a certain mold. So how does that affect the book itself? And how does it affect the way that you guys look at it? Because it doesn't fit super neat inside a mold, and other people look at it in different ways.
Good. I'm glad. It's not supposed to be just your typical, oh my gosh, we're off to see the wizard and we're going to have, a couple guys fight. And we're going to have some chicks with big boobs. We're going to have, blah, blah, blah. The sword and sorcery tropes need to be turned inside out every now and then, not to the point that it excludes fans of the genre, but it needs to, get a kick in the balls and start up again. I mean, it needs to go. And I don't think I ever thought, oh, we're going to fuck this genre up. No, I told a story. Brian told a story. And maybe you're hearing me in the voice you hear in your head yell as you read the dialogue. But no, it was meant to be something good in the story that was different than what you normally would get. Because we've all read that stuff before, and let's do something new or something a little bit different, but also in the traditional vein of it. And it's the fact that she was slightly disturbed by it, I think that's awesome. I think that's great. I wasn't trying to, piss anybody off, or Brian wasn't either. But I mean, it's good that you like I said,
she took it as a good thing. Like she was just like, it's still sitting with me. And like I said, maybe I'm jaded. I've read a lot of horror over the years.
There's things I talk about when I'm right. Go ahead. I'm sorry, we're delaying
it's just one of those things that from the publishing perspective, when you have those books, and Apex does it a lot, it's like we want to hurt ourselves. It's harder from publishing perspective, like who do you target it to? And it's because you have some people, a lot of readers who are very much stuck in their lane, and trying to get them to veer out of their lane at all is difficult from a marketing perspective. So I just wondered if that went into your thought process, like, holy heck, I'm writing a book that Lesley's going to be going, who do I market this to?
A little bit. Yeah. Speaking to what Shrews said about the tropes, sword and sorcery is full of tropes, and some of those tropes, we don't need them in 2022. You know what I'm saying? So for me personally, because the way Shrews and I did these, he would write the first draft, and then I would go through and do a second draft, and then together we would do the third and final draft. for me, the heart of the book and my voice is very much Javon, Rogan's nephew. And because Rogan is a walking, talking trope. I love the character. Shrews, you have absolutely created one of my favorite characters of all time in Rogan. I love Rogan, but he's not a good guy. He's a Tony Soprano. He's a Vic Mackey.
Oh yeah.
He is a hugely problematic character, and yet you can't help but root for him. And I always try to speak through Javon. Javon is like, if Rogan is Shrews or myself, then Javon is one of our sons, saying, Dad, that's not really appropriate. Think of it in these terms, and it's subtle, but throughout the 3 books, you see Rogan changing. This character who wouldn't budge for anybody. Javon can convince him to see things in a new light and reconsider, things. And it was fun to play with the tropes in that regard. But as far as marketing the book, yeah, I knew that was going to be a struggle for you guys. Shrews is an accomplished fantasy author. I'm an accomplished horror author. And I did worry about that. So when the first book won, Word for Best Fantasy, I was like, all right, cool. Maybe readers see, it is very firmly old school sword and sorcery. But yeah, there's a lot of horror put in the emotional equivalent, not just the gore. I mean, there's definitely gore, but
the part where he's beating somebody with the entrails of the hellhound, I was like, yay. But like I'm a strange person.
Well, it always amazes me when people come up with things like that or pick out a scene and I forget about that happened. I'm like, okay, I guess that happened. Yeah. You go through, and Brian writes so much too. I'm so far away from that happening. I'm like, yeah, I remember that now that you said that. But
yeah,
it's also, you put yourself in that position when you're choreographing a fight or a scene. I'm writing something that Brian and I have been nothing to do with each other, but I mean, pitching and silly things. And I love choreographing a fight where your arms would be to grab this and do this. I love doing that. When the boys were little, I would take them down on the mat and do things, but they're too big to do that too now. And actually like see, okay, this is where the hand goes and this is where this is. So hopefully I've not scarred them for life. But yeah, it's a neat thing when you put yourself in that scene to say, yeah, scoop it out and we're going to use it. It's something that, it's what you would do if you were really there in theory, if you were that guy. So that's why he would use that as help. And also he cared enough about J-Van not just to say, fuck him, let's leave. They went into the land of Nod to get him back.
Yeah, they absolutely did. Because Rogan didn't want to go there. He was like, why take myself to this fight when I don't have to?
Maybe if he was a younger man, he would have had like, fuck him, I'll take them all on. He's older and smarter and like, but he had to do what he had to do.
So you guys, and that leads directly into what I wanted to talk about next. You guys have both written quite a lot, and you have protagonists of many different age ranges. What is the writing process like for writing an older protagonist? And do you find that is received in a different way from younger protagonists?
That's a great question because it's something I have been pondering a lot lately. Before now, I guess my third published novel, my fourth published novel, Earthworm Gods. At the time, that came out in 2005, I think, and at the time, critics raved about, he's got this 82-year-old protagonist, and it's amazing. That was easy. I just wrote about my grandpa. Teddy Garnett, the character in that novel, he's my grandpa. He talks like my grandpa. He's got my grandfather's background. now, many, many years later, I find it a lot easier to get into the mind of an older protagonist than I do a younger one. I've been fooling around with this novella, and it was supposed to be about this father and son. They go for a walk in the woods. Something happens to the father, and the kid has to go for help, and he gets lost. And I realized about 2 chapters in, this father doesn't feel authentic because he's supposed to be like 32 years old, and I don't remember what it's like to be 32 anymore. I don't have the pop culture references. I don't have that. So I changed it and made the character a grandpa in his early 50s. And now that works. But I said this, I gave a speech right before COVID, and I was talking about this. I use Stephen King as an example. Carrie is a young person's novel. He wrote that when he was very young, and it comes from that place. Whereas 11/22/63, if he had tried to write that in his 20s, I don't think the novel would have been nearly as successful as it was. I think that was a novel that had to be written from the benefit of age and looking back. I don't know about you, Shrews, but I find probably actually starting with Curse of the Bastards, I find all of my work starting to be told from that perspective now.
It's a thing of, like I said, I couldn't have written some of the other stuff I do, like the horror westerns where it takes place with Joel Stewart as an older man. I couldn't have done that as a young guy. And it's life experience, I'm sure. And you're right about the pop culture references. I'm glad I have children. I can say, hey, what's this mean? I'll text Aaron something in school about what the hell does this mean without Googling it. And he'll say, one time he said, Google it yourself. And it was some dirty Sanchez derivative that I don't want to talk about. But I said, what does this mean? He goes, you got to be kidding, Dad. So it's the funny things. But they, like for expression the other day, or in the past year, he said something about something was lit. The fuck does that mean? Well, I figured out what, because I'm an old man. I don't know what lit means nowadays. But I'm not about to use that in a anytime soon. That's one good thing about sword and sorcery. I don't have to worry about modern references. It is fun to write something modern day times because it's a challenge and you keep up with things. And you can deploy what is at your leisure. But it's better to write things, as you said, he couldn't have wrote Carrie. It'd be different now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I understand what you're saying there completely because it's easier for a guy who's older, who knows what an older man's body feels like as he gets older, even if he's strong and bigger than we are. I mean, I'm still pretty strong, but not like I used to be. I always say I'm not over the hill, but I can see the base coming. But I mean, I understand what it's like to get more tired in a 12-hour shift than when I was a kid.
Right.
And I can see where Rogan's juice would run out quicker, or anybody else that's older. So it's an interesting, and I think it's just growing older.
I always talk about Jonathan Banks, the actor on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, the guy that plays Mike, the fixer.
Right.
He does not get enough credit for the things he doesn't say. He doesn't portray it in dialogue. He portrays it in movements and the way he sighs and facial expressions. This is a character who lives in chronic pain. That character is in constant pain. They never say it in either of the shows,
right,
but it's canon just in how he portrays it. This is a guy who has led a hard knock life and he's now paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you find that books where you use an older protagonist find a different readership? Because I know, like, as I'm getting older, I'm no longer, I don't want to say no longer, but I'm more drawn to reading more books that have older protagonists now than when I was younger. When I was younger, I would have been like, I don't get it. And, and there's plenty of YA out there. But do you find that sometimes maybe some younger readers who may be finding some of your earlier works that have younger protagonists maybe bounce off some of the stuff that features an older protagonist because they just don't connect?
I don't know. That's a great question. It's something I've been pondering because I'm exactly in that place. I've got 50 plus books that are available out there, and I do have Generation Z members who are discovering my books, on their parents' or their grandparents' bookshelves, and they're reading them, and that's great. But because I have so much out there, I can't really tell if the stuff with the older protagonists is appealing to them or not. I don't have the data yet, but I wonder about it myself.
Okay. I just know that I want to read more books where the women are my age. I don't need to read about a 25-year-old woman with a perfect body. Give me the 40-something-year-old mom who's been through some shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Well, when we talk about representation, absolutely, people of color and the LGBTQ community, it's all of that is important when it comes to representation. But, we also need people from other walks of life. Like you just said, the mother in her 40s, I absolutely think we need that, not just in fiction, but in film and in video games and in anything we're consuming as a society.
Right.
Well, Brian, women over 40 don't exist. We're invisible. All right, so this is the third of the Rogan books that you guys have written together. Did the writing process change between the three of them, or was it always that Stephen would write the first draft, you'd do the second draft, and then you collab on the third?
Well, the first couple there came together in a much different way than this last one, but roughly, we discussed where we wanted it to go, and anybody who's talked to me for any sort of amount of time knows that I can, if I strike a trail, I'll hit it, and I'll keep going until I get something shoved out there. And sometimes it isn't all good, but it gets out there. I tell a story. So I'd say this book came about differently than the first two. It's a different animal. That's why I always say you could read this one without even reading the other two. I recommend you do. But this one is a more self-contained story. I mean,
I absolutely feel like you could read. I agree. You could absolutely read this one on its own, especially because of the beginning part at the end, in the beginning, where it kind of tells Rogan's story up to where we're at. Right. So, because it's been years since I read King and Throne, and I did not feel lost at all.
Well, you see also, I threw in the part at the beginning where Rogan had been there before to this location when he was a young fellow with his father. And then you see what happens later because he's traveled, all over. But you see he had experience in this exact location. So he was kind of getting I wouldn't say the willies, but he knew where he was. So I wanted to kind of plant that seed at the beginning because people will say to me, well, what happens next? Well, I know what happens next, but we'll get around to that someday.
I would say I would say on my part, the actual writing process, I agree. The third book, we fleshed out the story more together before we started writing it. But I always view, I've collaborated with a lot of people, Jesus Gonzalez, Jeff Cooper, Nick Mamatas, Mary Sangiovanni, Richard Chismar, etc., Brian Smith. And every one of those processes has been very different. With Shrews, I always feel like it's the potter's wheel. Shrews makes the actual pot, gets the clay, gets it in the shape of the pot. You look at it and you're like, this is a pot. And my job is to come along and put the glaze on it and put the decorations on it and the design. And then together we put it in the kiln. We've got a finished pot. With the third book, we definitely brainstormed a lot more together before we ever started putting the clay on the wheel. I think probably the only big thing, though, that changed between the first book and now this third one is, and you tell me if I'm wrong, brother, but I think you probably trust me a little more with your character because Rogan's your baby.
Probably,
and I think now
Yeah.
I'm not going to have him, sit down in a field of flowers and contemplate his existence or, talk about his feelings.
Yeah, I can't
don't
see
think
him doing
Rogan
that
would do
too
that.
much. No, I mean, one of the funnier questions I get asked sometimes, people that have read them, is who wrote what part. And there's a scene in one of the first book where he takes his sword and wipes it on the hair of this girl to get the blood off of it, just to fuck with her head. And they go, who wrote that? You or Brian? I don't remember writing that, so it was probably him. So, I mean, it was just one of them things that I was like, oh, yeah, that happened, didn't it? So, I mean, it's fun stuff.
I've had fans at signings and conventions. Oh, yeah, I knew Shrews wrote that part. Nope. No, he did not.
No. But that's fun stuff because in a way we challenged each other in some ways because I was like balls out, no big, I don't want him eating babies or anything, but I didn't want anything suspending his ability to what he was going to do because he's a prick. He's an anti-hero more than anything, and he's not a nice guy. So he's liable to do anything. Although I think he generated he's changed a little bit over the course of the books, which that's life. You do.
Yep.
Or else why is you're really worthless. So we all do.
Exactly.
So
I'd like to talk a little bit about the character development of Roan, who is introduced in this book, and which I loved seeing this very fierce, badass female character who is just kind of like, screw you. You're either with me or you're not, but I'm not dragging you along. So how did that character kind of come to be? And
I wanted to write a story with she is Gore Legal's daughter, who I write in other books about, the 700-year-old warrior who's Rogan's Hunter S. Thompson. And I have an entire novel about her, you'll be glad to know, but I have not sold it. It's in third draft that I've written about her. And she wanted to imagine growing up in the shadow of your father. But the story was she became into his life late in life. She's like 140 years old. I didn't tell that because she lives longer than like Rogan does. That she's like from the cradle of civilization like Gore was. So, but she is an interesting character that I'm not sure why I decided to stick her in there. Probably because at the very beginning, when she says she's Roan Legal, and he goes, well, why? He goes, well, her fucking standard says she is. I mean, it was kind of a joke to stick her in there, but she wanted her father's armor back. And It's a slow process of her development. And she's a tough girl who grew up with her dad and worshiped her father and absolutely worshiped him. And at the end, she ends up with what she wanted in an ironic way. And she's not done developing yet either as a character. She's an interesting person, a tough girl, a very tough woman. I mean, she's a badass.
I swear I'm not saying
for
this
me,
for
writing as a woman. Pardon me?
I'm sorry, Shrews. We got lag here. Go ahead, finish.
For me to write a novel with a woman in the lead character, as I did with her in this book that's not out yet or been submitted, that's a stretch for me. But I like doing that. I don't like just writing the same thing. You got to try to challenge yourself. And she's an intriguing character, which is why I think that once everybody gets a taste of her here, I'm hoping they're going to want to see her in the next book or another book.
I swear I'm not saying this for the live stream. In my second draft, Lesley, I saw Roan as you. No, I genuinely did.
Wow.
I mean, look, Lesley, as we said earlier in the stream, and by the way, for those folks just joining us, we do see your questions, and we promise we will get to every question in the comments. Just be patient. But we were talking earlier, all three of us, our dear friend JF Gonzalez, Jesus Gonzalez, he was your mentor, Lesley.
He was, yeah.
And, this is the guy that wrote Survivor. Hands down, undisputably, universally agreed upon, the most hardcore it will break you extreme horror novel ever. Possibly topping Jack Ketchum's Girl Next Door, at least side by side with it.
Yep.
You know, and then you drop Weighted Chains, which just blows the fucking doors off. Yeah. So I saw Roan in my head, like when I'm trying to get into her head, I'm like, all right, well, it's Lesley. You know, if she had to live up to Jesus's reputation, you know, that's who this character is. So that in my second draft, that's how I pictured her.
Now I'm really glad I really liked her and I brought her up.
She's probably taller than you are, but anyway.
Probably, yeah. So I feel like the plot of this book is much more layered than King of the Bastards and stuff. There is so much backstabbing, and not even just backstabbing, like people who have their own agenda, and it's kind of just like a big fuck off to everyone else. They don't care who they kill in the process of reaching their end goal. Was the process of trying to keep all of these different people and all the different relationships and who's working with this person, but then they're also kind of working with this other person. Was that a difficult process to kind of keep straight during the writing process?
I don't know, not so much. I mean, I saw a lot of the characters very clearly, like the one backstabbing mercenary who ends up in the dragon's nutsack.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spoiler. I mean, he was a real creep. And I could see that guy as someone that I kind of know, one of those spoiled valor guys who wants to claim to be a veteran of something and never did that kind of stuff. I know of somebody like that, and let's just say that kind of seeped in there. And I'm coming from a family of veterans and people who served in wars. That kills me when people claim that. That's why when that guy claimed to kill the Chimera of somebody, and Rogan turns to Jay Van and goes, that guy's full of shit because I'm the one who killed that fucker. He's lying. I mean, right. I knew I wanted to establish his douchebaggery right away. So, but different people, I don't know. I mean, I kind of had an idea of where it was going, and when we plotted it out, it all kind of worked out just right. I mean, I wanted to get to a certain place, and I'm sure Brian did too. So it all worked out fine. I mean, sometimes when you have a good story in your mind like that, the layers and all that, it just kind of tells itself. And you said is it hard to sync that up? I don't know. It just kind of come out. I don't know. I don't know what other way to say it. I mean, it was just kind of I knew them people clearly what they looked like and what they were about and what each one wanted. And it was bizarre because they didn't exist until it got rolling. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, yeah, that person would want this and they would want that. But then the ultimate agenda with the dragon and everything at the end, to be honest, that kind of changed from what originally we thought of. I was talking it out to my buddy Dennis, who always gets to hear my shit. I'm sure he's happy about it. But sometimes just talking about it makes it happen. You know, it comes out. And I was like, holy shit, he's going to get fucked out of getting in that thing. And I was like, that's the fucking answer. That's the answer. So, you know, it just, things go that way. So sometimes that awesome explosive thing is just great, you know. I wish I could model it.
Yeah.
So it's
I just felt like at the end of this one, it was like, right? Well, you have this person who has like this plot going on and they deal with that. And then they have to move on to the next person that has another plot going on. Like it wasn't a simple, like, here's the bad guy, right? Beat the shit out of the bad guy. Like there were just so many layers and so many people with different agendas. And some of them you're like, well, are they bad or do they just know what they want and don't care who they step on in the process?
I don't think Nosmata believes he was the bad guy.
No, not at all.
I don't think he does. He doesn't. Good villains are guys who don't fucking think they're bad. And he's a bad guy and he would do anything to get what he wanted. But in his brain, he's not a bad guy. which makes him really dangerous because he'll do anything. So you rub up against guys like that are tough. It's like it's something else. So.
All right, so one of the questions somebody on Twitter, because I posted out there that if anybody had any questions to send my way, someone wants to know, Rodney wants to know, who would win in a fight, Conan or Rogan?
Conan. Excuse me, no, Rogan. And I say that as a lifelong Conan fan, but Conan has a conscience. And
there
Rogan. Yeah, Rogan does not.
Not so much.
As Shrew said it earlier, Rogan is an anti-hero,
Mm-hmm. Yep. He is a very Keene-ish person.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended with what happens. Spoiler.
Right. That's what I was just like.
No, I mean.
So what? Like, I don't have a background in sword and sorcery books. So if you're looking at somebody who's like read The Curse of the Bastards, but all of these 3 books, the Rogan books, and they're like, what else should I read?
Killer of Giants.
Yeah, I mean, Shrews has a book out. It's younger Rogan called Killer of Giants. Definitely you should pick that up. For me, I don't read a lot of new sword and sorcery just because I don't have time to read everything. People send me books literally every week. I get books in the mail. Can you blurb this? Can you read it? I don't have time. But I do have favorites. Certainly the Conan stuff, not just Robert E. Howard's originals. I enjoy all the stuff that others have done over the years, John Maddox Roberts and Carl Edward Wagner, etc. Speaking of Wagner, I would definitely recommend the Keene novels. Charles R. Rutledge is an author you should look into. That would be my 3 recommendations. Oh, and Joe Lansdale's Under the Warrior Star, which is it's a Lansdale novel, but it's a sword and sorcery novel.
I second what he said, but if you want to grab a modern author who isn't necessarily that, but do you know who Joe Abercrombie is?
Oh, yeah.
You heard the name.
Yeah.
British. Now, I did not read his First Law trilogy to start with. I read a single standalone book called Best Served Cold, where this woman who's a mercenary is thrown out of the tower, and the only reason she lives is she bounces off her brother and dies. And she gets revenge on all the guys who fucked her over. Lesley, you would love this book. It's called Best Served Cold, and it's a harsh novel. The scene where the guy is pounding the guy's arm on the anvil. God, I wish I would have wrote that. You got this guy tied down, and her guy she's doing is pounding his arm with a hammer and breaking every bone, every inch. God, I was like, I wish I would have wrote that. Beautiful. No, not all. I mean,
so
it's
sword and sorcery. I spit on your grave.
Oh, it's ferocious. It's good. It's very good. The other thing is he writes some of his stuff like westerns, like Red Country and the different ones. They're almost like messed up westerns, but it's sword and sorcery. So, and he's British and he's a great writer. I can't say good enough things about Joe Abercrombie. Good stuff. I say Best Served Cold. If you write it, you will thank me later. If you read it, you'll thank me later.
Taking notes on my notepad over here.
Okay. I mean, it's a good book. Damn good book. So
we got any more Twitter
then I wanted to read everything up.
The other question that we had with Twitter, it kind of went, well, wait. So somebody wanted to know about with collaborating, what is the best part of collaborating when you're writing and what's the worst part?
Well, that's a good question.
We talked about collaborating, but we didn't get into the nitty gritty.
Specifically between us or in general? I say we go in general, right?
I would say in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, the best part, the absolute best part is when both of you are excited by the idea and magic is happening. And I've had 4 collaborators that's happened with: Shrews, JF Gonzalez, Brian Smith, and Nick Mamatas. All 4 of those, it's just, you can't wait for your partner to send the manuscript back to you so you can take it back over. You're genuinely excited. I write for a living. I come up here to this office every morning. I get up at 5 every morning. I work out. I do all that shit. I start writing at 7, and I'm in here till at least 2 in the afternoon. And there are days where it feels like I'm back at the foundry. I'm back driving truck. I'm back on the loading docks. There are days where it is not a fun job. So when you have that magic moment in those collaborations, that's the best part. The worst part is waiting to get it back. Waiting for them to send the manuscript back. Shrews, how about you?
Well, I will agree with you there. It's interesting. We were drawn together to create to create the stuff in the first place because we both liked Howard. We liked that kind of stuff. We thought it was lacking these days. So it was interesting to write that and to find somebody that got it, that understood what you're talking about. That's kind of rare because not everybody gets that these days. And also I agree with what he said, seeing what's coming next. It's like, wow, I didn't see that turn. Right. Good idea. And I mean, there's that explosive thing. As far as the bad part, I don't know. We all got our own ego in trying to make people understand what we see. Because in my mind, it's clear, but maybe it isn't as clear to him or whoever I was writing with. Because I wrote with Peter Welmerink and with Nate Southard years ago. And it's a different kind of thing to go through to do that. My running joke is, and I get asked this at conventions sometimes, Brian, I will say, what's it like writing with Brian Keene? And I said, well, the nipple clamps are rough at first, but after that, it's okay. Just kidding, maybe. So, no, I just make a joke of it as far as that goes. But they all act like you're going to impart some kind of major secret. And I says, he loves the shit I like. He gets the Howard character. As flawed as Howard was as writing things as a human, he understands the storyteller. He understands it all, and he gets it like I get it. And that's a rare thing. Not everybody does. So I can live with that. So we can always communicate that way. So
I can too.
So.
All right. So that is all the questions that I wrote up beforehand. Do you want me to scroll through the comments?
Well, yeah, I can see them right here.
I can't see the comments.
I've gone back to the beginning, and I will start putting them up. I'll put them up on the screen for you, Shrews. Anthony Naylor,
I can see them now.
For Shrews, does Killer of Giants or any of your future solo Rogan books connect besides the main character?
I beg your pardon. Did they what?
Anthony, Shrews has been drinking, so we're going to read this again so that he understands what you're asking.
What?
Besides Rogan. Okay, what he's asking is all of your stuff in the shared universe?
Roughly, because we get to see in Killer of Giants how he meets the father of Javan, Thyson. You get to see how he meets him on the battlefield. We get to see that who his father would have been in Transalpina, because I've already 3 books ahead of what you guys know about, and they're heading back to basically across Africa and up towards what France would be. And that's where he ran away from, the spearman. And Rogan's going along for the ride, and they're encountering different things. But yes, in my mind, everything does connect back. Gorius Legal just predates Rogan by a ways. He's dead by the time Rogan comes up, but his daughter is the same. He's there. Roan Legal is in the same era as Rogan. However, Roan is geographically, when the book I write about her, is different than where he is. So they could meet someday, but I have no idea about that. I don't see that happening, to be honest. I see different things for what happens in Rogan's life, but yeah,
And
there's different people that are in the books.
We should point out your stuff, your books, and J.F. Gonzalez's books, and Brian Smith's books, and my books, and now Mary San Giovanni's books all take place in a shared universe at this point.
Yep.
We didn't intend to do that, but it has happened.
And I can live with that. I can live with it fine. It's like when he fights Meeble in the first book, that was somebody from the Labyrinth and all that, and that's a character that, it's an interesting person to take off on it.
And you've used the clickers, I mean, it's all shared at this point,
Because in something I'm writing right now, speaking of swords, I've thought about this woman who's a false daughter of Poseidon calls up something, and she can call up things that I was going to ask you, can I use the clickers to rise up over the boat to eat those things? Because I've thought about doing it, but I thought it makes sense that that's what she would call up, because it would be great at the end when he finally says to her, "You're no mer woman, you're just a woman with a bad case of the crabs." Anyway.
All right, now you have to do it. Now you have to do it.
Now I got it. Now I got to put them in there. But all
right, Lionel Ray Green asks, "I love how Mako narrated the story of Conan in the original movie. Did that influence the way you told the story of Rogan at all?" Shrews, I'm going to let you answer this one.
I got to admit, I enjoyed the Conan movie, the first one. It's not much of a Conan the Barbarian by Howard movie. It's a good movie, but it's not his story. That is an interesting way of putting it. In my mind, at the beginning of each Rogan novel, we get a little encapsulation of what has happened or what has happened before. Just as with Killer of Giants, at the end of it, him and Dyson leave Iram, the city of pillars, and they're heading towards Africa after they've dealt with the demons and everything else in the Nephilim at the end of Killer of Giants. And the narrator picks up again at the beginning. Now, I don't know if I really... Thanks a lot, because now I'm going to think about Mako fucking narrating it whenever I start a book now. So, cheers. Whoever the fuck said that, thanks a lot. That probably ruined that for me.
It was
no, it's not so bad. That's okay. I mean, I never thought about him having an official chronicler. In A Born of Swords, a Gorius Legal novel, there's a girl that is trying to get his story down, and it doesn't quite work out the way it was supposed to. But no, I never thought about the Mako thing until just now.
Now you can think of nothing else.
Now I will hear his voice going. So, there's worse things to have in your head.
Here we go. Okay. Noige Overlord asks, so when you two disagree with the direction something is going, how do you sort it out? I don't know that we ever have we?
Not specially, because I don't think we've got to a point where Brian wanted to say we need, Siamese twins midgets or something fighting. There's never been something so ridiculous.
Or said
like no, that's just.
I have said no, Shrews. It's 2020, whatever. You can't have Siamese twins midgets.
Okay, but if any, to be honest, it's people think it's him restraining or me restraining him. It's the other way around. But no, I don't think there's ever been a thing that's been broached that was seen as unsolvable. I think the sexual identity or gender of the alchemist in Curse was a question that came up at first. And I just think that was a flaw in writing the story. I don't think that was necessarily, if it got fixed, and Brian's more schooled at such things as I am. So other than that, I was like, well, I had no agenda to say nothing bad. And
I know what you're talking about. And I know your heart. I know who you are. Like you said, that was first draft, rushing through it.
It was a story.
And I got to it. I'm like, all right, you know what? Let's massage this a little bit. Let's make this character
all right.
A little more fleshed out.
And I can, what's the thing? You got to grow a little bit, and I understand. I'm open to understanding anything. I mean, it's just that I think I was getting to the idea. My original idea was just that an alchemist loses their gender. And I was like, and then I got thinking, well, just because somebody has something chopped off doesn't make that. I'm like, well, that's true. I'm a farm boy, so I understand. I mean, everybody should be able to grow and learn. Not everybody does in this damn world. That's what the problem with it is.
That's right.
But we won't go into politics tonight.
Discuss the riffs. Your question is kind of like the previous question. If you disagree, type it again and we'll get to it. But I think that's kind of the same question. Eddie Coulter wants to know, will we see Brian do his Shrews impression while doing a reading from Curse of the Bastards Scares the Kids? Of course.
I'm not going to be at Scares That Cares, so this needs to be videotaped.
Well,
oh my.
Now, of course, you're all here on my YouTube channel right now. There are 6 seasons of the Horror Show with Brian Keene available right here, all in a playlist, all in order, which has my Shrews impression, my John Urbansick impression, all my other impressions. But yeah, Eddie, you know what? If you were going to be at Scares That Care, then yes, command performance. I will do my Shrews impression.
And I promise I won't do anything violent to you.
All right. Anthony asks, what books of Mary's connect to my universes? There's a story at the end of Things Left Behind, which is our first official connection. But you know what? It's a launch party. What would a launch party be without some exclusive news that hasn't been announced anywhere? Mary has an occult detective character named Kathy Ryan, who she did a number of novels for Kensington Books with. I, of course, have my occult detective character, Levi Stoltzfus. And sometime in the very near future, they will be teaming up for a case that spans from New Jersey to Pennsylvania.
Cool.
So there you go.
Alrighty then.
Now I need to hurry up and read, so I'll be ready.
Now, Mr. McCobb, I'm going to skip over your question and I'll come back to it, but I'm going to go to Todd's because Todd's ties in with Eddie's. How many tables has Shrews broke while doing live readings?
One at least. When I was in Nashville, I didn't know it was going to break. It just happened to happen that way. When I finished the Rogan Rant, that I guess appears in Throne of the Bastards. Now that I think about it, I have the habit of him yelling for Wodan and slamming his arms on the surface of a table, and it broke like a fucking WWE thing. And I didn't. The funny part was somebody goes, "You acted like it didn't even happen." And I go, well, but before I read it, Scares a few years ago, Brian comes up to me and goes, "Don't be breaking my shit, okay?" And I'm like, okay. And it's funny because now I drop my fist and I did like this baby tap, like bang. So yeah, Todd was there. So I tried to behave myself, I try to be a good guy, but I might do the rant from Curse when they're getting ready to fight. When the dragon appears in the sky, because they're overwhelmed, because that's got a real, I'm an old German Lutheran down inside, and I love to quote the Bible even before the Bible was written in this case. And when Rogan sees the dragon in the sky and says, my God has not forsaken me. Oh, that's just fucking great. And I'd love to yell that and do that whole rant he does, but I'll see if that's how that works out. So.
Now, I've got a question for you.
See if Ron Kelly can live through this reading.
Well, that's the question I have for you. You are reading with Ronald Kelly, who is one of your heroes, and
oh God, yes.
Both. Yeah, I mean, you and me both.
I get nervous to see Ron.
Yeah, we owe a lot to Ronald Kelly, and I don't think Ronald's watching right now, but yeah. You have never been shy when it comes to doing readings.
Nope.
Do you find yourself, for the first time in your career, second guessing yourself because you're reading with Ronald Kelly? Are you like, oh, what should I read? Is this good enough?
It's funny you say that because I didn't realize how Ron was going to react to being in the same room as me when I read the first time. He was almost aghast, and I wasn't trying to freak him out or nothing. I was just being me. And boy, you can see the footage of him peeling off the fucking wall in the background. He is moving away like, holy shit, who is this? Who is this fucking farm boy redneck fucker doing this? And I was just being me. The funniest thing about that scene, somebody else said, your son John, who was probably 12 at the time, was sitting there like this. Because he's seen me genuinely angry before, and he wasn't impressed at all. It was the funniest thing. They go, Ron Kelly's over there peeling himself off the wall, and John's like, yeah, fuck, what's going on? So it's just kind of funny. Because they're like, yeah, that's dad. But no, I've honestly thought about, I got a set amount of things I like to do when I read. And I've honestly thought about, now, as like I said, it's a little bit of pressure. Is like, I mean, I love Ron. I mean, I respect Ron so much, and people are like, a guy my size seeing Ron, I'm almost like afraid. It's bizarre, you know. It's like, because he's, I mean, I love him. You know, he's a great writer. Inspired me so much. So I don't know. We'll have to see, but I reckon it'll be fine. I reckon it'll be good. I mean, I've thought about. I've got to do something loud and obnoxious at the end, or I wouldn't be me. So, but I got an idea what I'm gonna do.
All right,
I think we'll be all right. I can't wait to hear him read.
Here we go. In the clay pot scenario, who was Demi Moore and who was Patrick Swayze?
Wow,
I was Demi all the way.
Yeah, I think that would probably just a size thing. I think. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Next.
What is going on in people's heads? I tell you what. And we're supposed to be the horror writers.
Anthony,
a lot of horrific scenes I'm coming in.
Anthony's back to Mary and I. It will be something new, something that we are plotting but have not yet written. Getting back to your reading, Shrews, Eddie said it was a 3 shots of whiskey moment for sure. And anybody else, if you want to get your final questions in, go ahead. Lionel asks, I'm reading Mr. Keene's Island of the Dead on Vela. Is there any influence or inspiration from Rogan on Enar's character? That's a great question. No. There's not supposed to be. If there is, then I'm not doing my job well. I wanted Enar to be very different from Rogan, very different from Conan, etc. You know, we haven't really revealed a lot of his origin or his backstory yet. I've been kind of letting little snippets come through in the dialogue, but he's a very different character. He's a barbarian, but he has a very specific moral code and code of honor that you're really going to start see coming out here in the next few chapters. I don't think he would care much for Rogan, and I don't think Rogan would care much for him.
Probably not.
Charles Rutledge says, I missed the bit about Levi because my cat knocked my headphones off. What was the crossover with Mary Sangiovanni's Kathy Ryan? And Eddie wants to know, what's the chance of y'all co-writing a Western?
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow, indeed. That's a good question, because Westerns right now, for the writers in the chat, Westerns, if you want to sell a novel, Westerns are very easy to sell right now because they're back in popularity. People are reading them. But the problem is a lot of the people who used to write them have died off. Yeah. I know several mainstream publishers who are very, very hungry for Westerns. I myself am writing a mainstream Western right now. And Shrews, I know you love Westerns.
I've written a few horror Westerns, of course, but I've actually got something I'm doing. I've been meaning to get back to it. That's as regular of a Western as I can do. Because my ancestry comes from the Missouri Raiders and things, and hard to believe. Yeah. But yeah, there's some interesting stories I'd like to tell that don't involve, demons or voodoo people or things like that. That actually is an actual Western story. If I told you the title, you'd go, "Oh shit," because you instantly would invoke what the story's about. I mean, it's a neat idea, but I'll get around to it. No.
Excuse me 1 second here, guys.
As far as the Western.
No, you go ahead, Shrews. I'm checking Twitter to make sure.
No, I mean,
questions there.
I thought it was interesting that Clint Eastwood's son Scott says he gets offered Westerns all the time, but they're shit. They're not a good story, and I respect that. Don't make it if it's crap. But there's stories to tell because they're human stories at the very least. It's just the background, but it's a lot of fun. And I've had this idea in the title for a long time, to the point that I almost thought I must have heard it somewhere. So I'm like scanning Amazon for the title, and nope, not been written. So if I say it out loud, someone will steal it. So I don't want to say it. That's how paranoid writers are. Like, we're that brilliant, All
right. So I think this might be our last question for the night. My favorite book this year. Shrews, your favorite book this year, and Lesley, we're going to include you in this too. Your favorite book this year. I'm just going to do 4 really quick, and this is not to slight anyone else. It's just the 4 they're sticking in my mind right now. Plastic Monsters by Daniel Volpe, Thigh Gap by Chandler Morrison, Mayhem at the Museum by Regina Watts, and Faces of Beth by Carver Pike. That are my 4 right now. We've stumped the others. I should have took my time.
Go ahead.
No,
Lesley.
I mean, I would say probably right now I'm reading a whole lot of old stuff. I'm going back and reading. I read Red Dragon and The Silence of the Lambs because I had never read them, but I've owned them since like forever. But recently, probably my favorite novel that I've read is Christy DeMeester's new novel, Such a Pretty Smile. It was amazing, which I love her short fiction. Apex has a collection of her short fiction out, and so I was very excited to read. It's not her first novel, but it's like her first mainstream novel, and it does not disappoint. It is fantastic. And I love that you remember what you read. I can't remember what I've read, Brian. You're like, what have you read recently? I'm like, I don't know what I'm reading right now.
I cheated though, because like you, I've been going back and I coming out of COVID, I was in a pretty bad place. Not for me personally, but I didn't like what the pandemic did to my loved ones. So I was finding comfort wherever I could, and that was in rereading a lot of old favorites. Those 4 books are really some of the only new books I've read this year. So it was easy to remember.
I mean, I find that I buy a lot of recent books. Alex E. Harrow's A Spindled Splintered came out, I think, last year, and the second one just came out, and I've not had a chance to read it yet. It's a retelling of the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale in modern times, and it is fantastic. It was like one of those books that I finished it, and immediately I've been like shoving it at my daughters, like, you guys need to read this book, it's so good. But again, I find that I buy books and they go on my bookcases, and then 20 years later I read them. Like, I'm not even kidding. I pulled the copy of Red Dragon, which I had never read, off our bookcase because I've been really into crime fiction lately. Pulled it out, and inside it's like Lesley McPherson, who I've not been since 2005, 2004. So I have moved that book through college, through my first apartment with my husband, all the subsequent apartments before I actually read it. So
wow.
Wow.
All right, so Shrews, we have stalled for you long enough. What was your best book you read this year?
Oddly enough, it's one of the Star Wars Thrawn novels by Timothy Zahn that John gives me for Christmas every year, a hardback of Timothy Zahn. Have I ever told you about me meeting Timothy Zahn? Someday
no, but I think you need to.
I would give you the pitch I gave him for a Boba Fett novel, and he told me that the ending is extreme. It's a bit much. So imagine that. But if I told you the end, you'd go, "Oh, that's fucking great," but it's a bit much for sci-fi. But the latest Thrawn novel I've read, I read a lot of history too. I read a book about Reichsmarshal about Hermann Goring recently, and I read one of the last of the Joel Abercrombie of this last trilogy he's doing. So that's what I've been reading lately. That, and I brushed up on a little Howard Bizarre stuff recently for a different reason. But I'm always reading. If anybody ever finds something of Howard that I've never read,
yeah, I've been brushing up on Howard.
If anybody ever wants to ever, I understand. There's a young lady in Virginia who sends me
we have to stop right there. We can't say anything else.
Yes. She has sent me rare Howard stuff, and sometimes she'll send me poems and stuff that I've never seen, and I'm like, oh, me reading Howard that I've never seen is amazing. So I've been reading a lot of things that, stimulate my brain in that regard. So
yeah,
we'll talk about that other stuff we're not allowed to talk about. But no, every once in a while I go and revisit him because sometimes he speaks to me, and my running joke is it's good to hear his voice in my head than Truman Capote. But that's my always joke about hearing Howard's voice. Somebody goes, "Do you hear his voice in your head?" And I go, "Check out the shirt." I don't know if you noticed it, but it's like
hang on. Let me make you full screen for a second. So
I don't know if you can see that or not. It's the famous quote about barbarians being nicer than some people because they, about their being skull split. So that was a gift from a fan too. So
I think that's a beautiful note to end this live stream.
Ain't it though?
Well, Lesley, thank you so much.
I got to get up in a couple hours.
And thanks
thank you,
to
Lesley. It was
everybody.
wonderful to see you.
It's wonderful to see you too.
Now
We've never spoken other than through email.
And now you will be Roan, whether you like it or not.
Oh.
Now you're going to be Roan.
Hey, I do like it. Roan kicked ass. So
a very tall version of you, yes. Maybe your hair will be a little redder, but
thanks for everybody for coming out. Curse of the Bastards, available right now in paperback, Kindle, Nook, Kobo, and Apple ebook. Audiobook coming soon. And go get yourself one. Get two, actually. Buy one for somebody you love.
And for your enemies too.
Yeah, and for your enemies too. All right, we'll see you later.
Cool.
Bye. Thank you.
Take it easy, folks. Thanks for having me.